Part 1. You will hear a conversation between a customer at a logistic company and a market survey expert. First, you have some time to read questions 1 to 5. Now listen carefully and answer questions 1 to 5.
Good morning. I'm conducting a short customer survey for the Tasman Logistics Company. I noticed you just collected your boarding pass. Would you mind if I asked you a few questions about your trip?
Yes, that's fine. I've got a few minutes to spare before I board the ferry to Tasmania.
Excellent. First, could you confirm your full name for me?
It's Racquel Dyson.
Thank you, Miss Dyson. Is your first name spelled as Racquel?
No, it's Racquel.
Beautiful, thanks for that. Let me write that down. And would you mind giving me your year of birth? We only record the year for data purposes.
No problem. It's 1978.
Great. Now, I need your residential address, including the postcode. We often send out loyalty discounts and information about upcoming services.
Sure. I live at 12 Westbourne Crescent in Malvern, and the postcode is 3143.
How do you spell Westbourne, please?
Sure, it's West as in West and Bourne. Bourne.
Perfect. Now, may I ask what date you booked your ferry?
Let's see, I booked it on the 15th of July. Oh, hold on. Actually, it's 16th of July. Sorry.
Thanks. And what's the primary purpose of your journey to Tasmania this time around? Business? Leisure?
A bit of both, really. I'm there for a short conference, but I'm also hoping to spend some time visiting vineyards. However, the main reason is definitely my conference commitments in Hobart.
I see. Conferences can be fun, especially if you have spare time for sightseeing. Now, how frequently do you use our ferry service? Have you travelled more often by air in the past?
I usually prefer the ferry because I can bring my car along for a much lower cost than renting one upon arrival. Plus, I enjoy the onboard amenities.
That's good to hear. It helps us to know why people choose our service. I'll make a note of that.
Sure.
Before you hear the rest of the conversation, you have some time to read questions 6 to 10. Now listen carefully and answer questions 6 to 10.
Before we continue, let me confirm, are you departing from the main terminal in Melbourne? Some customers sometimes use the satellite departure point on the eastern side of the city.
Yes, I'm leaving from this main one.
Right. Next, I'd like to know if you encountered any issues with parking availability near the terminal. Some travellers have complained about the car park being full or too expensive.
Well, I actually took a rideshare vehicle because the parking rates in the garage are quite high during peak season.
Understood. Our management is looking into partnerships for cheaper parking, so that feedback helps. Could you also comment on any improvements you think might be necessary once you board the ferry?
Certainly. On my last trip, there were some problems with the internet connection in the passenger lounge. It kept dropping out whenever we got a bit further from the coast.
We've had reports of that. I'll note it down as a major concern, especially for those travelling on business. By the way, do you plan on booking an accommodation unit for an overnight crossing, or are you going as a daytime passenger?
First I thought I should just book in an open sitting area for some fresh air, but then thought of going for a private suite, but then finally decided using a cabin this time. The journey can be quite long, so it's nice to rest and stay fresh for the next day.
Yes, indeed. A restful crossing makes a big difference. Could I ask if you've signed up for any membership with Tasman Logistics? We've recently started a loyalty program that offers discounts on future trips.
Actually enrolled last month. With the membership I received a slight reduction on my ticket price, but I'm still looking forward to more perks.
That's good to hear. Now, do you typically explore the local attractions near the terminal here or in Tasmania before continuing your journey?
I tend to arrive just in time to board on this side, but once I reach Tasmania, I often spend a day or so around the harbour area before driving south. Sometimes it helps me adjust if the crossing was bumpy.
Of course. So just to clarify, you'll drive from the Tasman Ferry Terminal in the north of the island down to Hobart for your conference, then do a bit of wine tasting, right?
Exactly. I've heard amazing things about some new vineyards opening up. It's part work and part pleasure, I guess.
Absolutely. All right, last few questions. Did you download our digital ferry pass? Or are you using a paper ticket?
I decided on the paper ticket because my phone battery was unreliable last time. It's a bit old, and I didn't want to risk being stuck without a boarding pass.
We do recommend the digital pass, but I understand. One final point, we're trying to reduce waiting times for checking in vehicles. Did you experience any delay or was it fairly smooth?
There was a bit of a queue, maybe around 20 minutes, but that was mostly because of a large group travelling together with lots of luggage. Generally, it was fine.
Great. Well, thanks very much for your time. Enjoy your conference and the vineyards afterward.
Thank you. Have a good day.
That is the end of part 1. You now have some time to check your answers. Now turn to part 2. Part 2. You will hear an organizer of Yarraville School Festival giving some information about the upcoming events. First, you have some time to read questions 11 to 16. Now listen carefully and answer questions 11 to 16.
Hello everyone and welcome back to our weekly community events roundup. Today we're focusing on the much anticipated Yarraville School Open Day Festival, which will run for 6 days this year, 1 day longer than last time due to the overwhelming success of previous events. Here to discuss all the festivities is the festival coordinator, Miss Harriet Burns. Welcome, Harriet.
Thank Thank you for inviting me. I'm thrilled to share what we have planned. Over the 6 days, you'll see exhibitions, performances, interactive sessions, and of course, opportunities for parents, children, and local residents to get involved. We've invited educators, professional artists, and community leaders from across the region to make this a truly inclusive festival. Let me give you an overview of our 6 key workshops, each designed to showcase a different facet of creative learning and cultural exploration. First, we have Art Attack, which caters especially for children who struggle with fine motor skills. The workshop is run by a team of special educators who have developed adaptive methods to make painting fun and accessible. In particular, it's specifically designed for young people with a visual impairment. They'll use raised line drawing boards and textured paint materials to help participants engage with art through touch. Everyone will be encouraged to experiment freely and create something unique to take home. Next is the session called Play It Again. This one's all about encouraging children to experiment with a range of musical instruments, everything from basic percussion to handheld keyboards. While participants will certainly sing and clap along, the emphasis is on practicing an artistic skill, in this case, hands-on instrument play. The conductor, Mr. Randolph Chan, has a wealth of experience working with community choirs, so participants can expect an energetic session. For those looking to build confidence, we have a workshop called Power Poise. It deals with issues around shyness and self-esteem aimed specifically at younger teens who are reluctant to speak up in group settings. With guided activities, the workshop leader, who is a former youth counselor, helps participants learn how to stand tall, project their voices, and engage in simple public speaking exercises. So the focus is very clearly on building self-confidence, which I think can really help students both in and out of the classroom. Our fourth event, Forward Thinking, is designed primarily for senior high school students. You might have heard about how older teenagers often face intense pressure as they start considering university or other career pathways. This workshop is specifically for older students. It aims to show them practical ways to handle exam stress and plan their next steps after graduation. We will have short seminars on mindfulness, tips on applying for scholarships, and group discussions on balancing social life with academic responsibilities. Now, one of the biggest highlights this year is Glowing Ink, led by the newly crowned Australian Writer of the Year, Stella McTavish. This is a wonderful chance for aspiring young authors to try various creative writing techniques and get feedback from a true professional. Parents and teachers have been asking for more writing workshops, and we've delivered. Everyone attending will learn about narrative structure, plot twists, and the art of concise storytelling. Because Stella recently received the National Literary Medal, this session is conducted by an award-winning writer. Lastly, we have an event called Rooted in Rhythm, focusing on celebrating the multicultural heritage of Yarraville's residents. It will spotlight songs, dances, and storytelling traditions from different cultural backgrounds to help children appreciate diverse customs. It's an interactive performance piece where the audience can join in. The workshop ultimately encourages people to explore heritage, showing how music and dance can bring communities closer. We'll even have a mini parade of costumes from around the world.
Before you hear the rest of the recording, you have some time to read questions 16 to 20. Now listen carefully and answer questions 16 to 20.
Wow, Harriet, that's a busy schedule. It sounds like you've got everything covered. Out of curiosity, is there a particular book or resource you'd highly recommend for children or teens who might be a little reluctant to read, something that might inspire them?
Absolutely. I've been telling everyone about a new graphic novel titled Daybreak Adventures. The author, Naomi Lee, is unknown to many, but I believe she's poised to become a big name. One reason I recommend it is that it addresses a major social concern, specifically adapting to a new school as a newcomer in a foreign country, from the perspective of a young student who speaks English as a second language. It also highlights real instances of culture shock which can be quite profound, so it covers an important topic. But let me tell you, this isn't the sort of book that's grim and depressing. It's actually laugh-out-loud funny. The narrator's commentary on everyday mishaps is unexpectedly witty, and the full-color illustrations of school life are both charming and comedic. So that's my other reason for praising it. Simply put, it makes you laugh. I've seen students roar with laughter when they get to certain panels. Really encouraging when you're trying to hook those reluctant readers.
That sounds perfect for my nephew. He's always been more interested in cartoons than reading text-heavy novels.
Yes, and I'd also say that for any reluctant reader, graphic novels can be a good stepping stone. Another tip for parents is to look for books that tie into your child's hobbies. If they love video games, introduce them to an illustrated guide to game design, for instance. Which leads me to some advice I often share with families who come to Yarraville's open day.
Oh yes, please. Any quick strategies for encouraging children to get more enthusiastic about reading or learning in general?
There are a couple of key points. Firstly, ask librarians for age-appropriate recommendations. Many parents don't realize librarians have specialized knowledge about which materials will engage different reading levels or interests. Librarians can often point out hidden gems you might not discover otherwise. Secondly, in today's world, you can also use audio materials, especially if your child is reluctant to read on their own. Hearing words spoken aloud can spark interest in the story, and sometimes kids will pick up the actual book because they already know and love the characters or plot.
I couldn't agree more. It definitely helps to provide multiple entry points to a story. Harriet, you've been a fountain of knowledge. Thank you so much for your time, and I hope this year's festival is a great success.
Thank you, and I hope everyone comes along and has fun.
That is the end of part 2. You now have some time to check your answers. Now turn to part 3. Part 3. You will hear a discussion between a teacher and a student about ethical hacking. First, you have some time to read questions 21 to 24. Now listen carefully and answer questions 21 to 24.
Right, Louisa. You are going to begin this week's seminar for us with a summary of your reading of ethical hacking.
That's right.
Great. Shall we start with a definition? How would you define ethical hacking?
Right. Well, we hear about hacking on the news all the time. From fake news to service attacks to data breaches. It seems like the bad guys are always causing trouble. And it's true, the bad guys are doing all kinds of damage, from the annoying spam in the email box to the destructive cyber attacks that steal personal data, or worse. But there are good guys with the same skills, and they are the ethical hackers.
But what is ethical hacking exactly?
An ethical hacker, also known as a white hat hacker, is the ultimate security professional. Ethical hackers know how to find and exploit vulnerabilities and weaknesses in various systems, just like a malicious hacker or a black hat hacker. In fact, they both use the same skills. However, an ethical hacker uses those skills in a legitimate, lawful manner to try to find vulnerabilities and fix them before the bad guys can get there and try to break in. An ethical hacker's role is similar to that of a tester, but it involves broader duties. They break into systems legally and ethically. This is the primary difference between ethical hackers and real hackers, the legality.
Right, so it's an individual who is usually employed by an organization and who can be trusted to undertake an attempt to penetrate networks and/or computer systems using the same methods as a malicious hacker.
Exactly. The role of an ethical hacker is important since the bad guys will always be there trying to find cracks, backdoors, and other secret ways to access data they shouldn't. In fact, there's even a professional certification for ethical hackers.
Apart from testing duties, do ethical hackers have other responsibilities?
Before you hear the rest of the recording, you have some time to read questions 25 to 30. Now listen carefully and answer questions 25 to 30.
The main idea is to replicate a malicious hacker at work, and instead of exploiting the vulnerabilities for malicious purposes, seek countermeasures to shore up the system's defenses. An ethical hacker might employ some strategies to penetrate a system, like scanning ports and seeking vulnerabilities. The vulnerabilities with each of the ports can then be studied and remedial measures can be taken. Another more unusual strategy is social engineering concepts like dumpster diving, rummaging through trash bins for passwords, charts, sticky notes, or anything with crucial information that can be used to generate an attack.
Wow, that's an unusual job description.
Yes, and there are more. An ethical hacker may also employ other social engineering techniques, like shoulder surfing, when they take a sneaky look over somebody's shoulder and look at the password they're typing onto the screen. For example, they might also play the kindness card to trick employees to part with their passwords.
I suppose that detecting how well the organization reacts to these and other tactics help test the strength of the security policy and security infrastructure.
Right. An ethical hacker attempts the same types of attacks as a malicious hacker would try, and then help organizations strengthen their defenses. While some may argue that there is no such thing as a good hacker, and all white hat hackers are actually bad hackers who have turned a new leaf, most people agree that the profession is here to stay. As with any profession, passion for the industry is one of the key aspects to success. This combined with a good knowledge of networking and programming will help a professional succeed in the ethical hacking field.
How much can an ethical hacker expect to make?
Well, that's an interesting question.
That is the end of part 3. You now have some time to check your answers. Now turn to Part 4. Part 4. You will hear a talk on the topic of food science. First, you have some time to read questions 31 to 40. Now listen carefully and answer questions 31 to 40.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the last lecture in the series on food science, which, as you already know, is about the avocado. Let's start with a little history. On May 15th, 1915, in the posh new Hotel Alexandria in Los Angeles, a cadre of California farmers gathered to decide the fate of a new crop. The aguacate, a pebbly-skinned, pear-shaped fruit, had been the staple food in Mexico and Central and South America since 500 BC. In the 16th century, Spanish conquistadors fell in love with the fruit after observing its prized status among the Aztecs. Until the early 1900s, the aguacate had never been grown commercially in the United States. By 1914, however, hotels in Los Angeles and San Francisco were ordering as many of the fruits as they could and paying as much as $12 for a dozen. But the farmers faced a marketing problem. First, aguacate was too hard for Americans to pronounce. It also had another unappealing name, alligator pear. The farmers came up with a new name, avocado. They informed dictionary publishers of the change and named their own group the California Avocado Association. The approach worked. Today, California accounts for nearly 90% of all avocados grown in the United States. When the farmers first met, E.J. Wilson, a Berkeley horticulturalist, predicted little interest from the American market, saying that it contained no sugar and fruits were supposed to be sweet, the sweeter the better. The farmers knew that Wilson's concerns were unfounded. What made the avocado so different from other fruits was the very reason it was appealing. Like most fruit, the avocado ripens once plucked from the tree, but its flesh is unlike any other, buttery, not sweet, somewhat nutty and oily in flavour. Firm enough to be sliced or diced, yet pliable enough to be mashed into paste or puree. There are more than 400 varieties of avocado, but Hass has become the most popular in the United States. Named after a postal worker, Rudolph Hass, who purchased the seedling in 1926 from a California farmer, the distinctive purplish black fruit has a thicker skin and smaller body than the other varieties. Farmers found the Hass easier to cultivate, and its higher oil content and good nutty flavour appealed to customers. Avocados present a mouth-watering array of serving options. They can be sliced and served with apples, nuts and cheese. In their most popular form, guacamole, they are mashed with salt, lime, garlic, coriander, chilies, and tomatoes, depending on the recipe. They can be fed to infants, and Indonesians blend them into drinks with sweet condensed milk. Brazilians add it to ice cream. Californians put it in their maki rolls. Avocados have a subtle nutty flavour, too subtle for some people to get excited about, but the beauty of avocados is not so much its flavour but its oily consistency. Avocados have become popular in restaurants and homes because, in food science terms, they act as a covalent bond with other ingredients. The creaminess of the fruit converts disparate tastes into complementary ones and adds flavour to otherwise dull ingredients. Another way to think of avocado's role is to consider the fat marbling in a prime steak. Marbling is what makes a steak flavourful. Avocados, with their natural fatty richness, serve a similar purpose when incorporated with other foods. Mash an avocado with a pinch of salt and a drizzle of oil, and you'll find it adds flavour to nearly any meal.
That is the end of part 4.